Good afternoon. We're getting closer and closer to Christmas now. Let's bring you a Christmas update and how things are looking for the next few days in the Christmas period. But first, we'll talk about the strong winds associated with Storm Pia last night, which is now rattling down the North Sea in towards Denmark, Holland, and parts of northern Germany, where we can expect some very strong winds and some coastal flooding over the next 12 hours or so. We talked about the storm yesterday. It came as no surprise. It shouldn't have come as any surprise. It was well forecast. I first mentioned it in Monday's video. How we're expecting these very strong winds to occur last night and at first today. Now, that came as no surprise. The speeds, anyway, we saw gusts in excess of 90 miles an hour in some very exposed spots. And I'll start by showing you this chart here. This is the current wind situation. You can see these very strong winds blowing down the North Sea. You can see that was the situation at noon. The strongest of the winds across the Northern Isles and across the northeast coast, but now running down the North Sea and battering the western side of Denmark, as you can see, northern Germany and down through Holland as well. Some very strong winds, some coastal flooding here due to high tides. Now that's the situation at noon. As you can see, as we go through the afternoon, the strongest of the winds transfer eastwards. You can see the strongest winds have left Shetland at this point. They're now running down into western parts of Denmark, whereas we're just left in this blustery, showery, and increasingly cold northwesterly flow as we go through the rest of the afternoon. And then by tonight, you can see the strongest winds away to the east. And we've got to look to the west now. We're starting to see this bulge of milder air, just trying to just nudge up from the south through the Atlantic and just come into the west. That's a sign that we're going to start to see the weather come back from the west again. At the moment, it's coming down from the northwest as this low pressure system moves east. That was the situation. 8 o'clock, you can see northwesterly. There's the strong winds over Shetland and Orkney we saw this morning and the north coast. That was the situation earlier. That's the situation by midnight. You can see the strong winds well to the east, and then we're starting to see more of a Atlantic influence, and that's a sign that we're going to start to bring a weather system in from the west and then a bit of a change into something a bit more Atlantic driven. But it will stay cold for the next day or so. We'll talk about that in a minute. So just to look back on the wind speeds recorded over the last 12 hours, really, the highest gusts 95 miles an hour on Sandy Hill and South Ronaldsay in Orkney, a very exposed site, notorious for getting strong winds. But this one here in Shetland, that's not particularly high up. That's almost sea level, 90. Elgol on Skye, that weather station's down at sea level, although it's quite exposed, 90 miles an hour. Blackcraig in Otley is another very exposed spot on the western side of the mainland. But again, it's not particularly high up, very exposed. And again, Shetland, another one at 87 miles an hour there, just outside Lerwick. Portsoy in Aberdeenshire, 84 miles an hour. That's quite impressive for a sea level site. It just shows the intensity of that northwesterly wind as they exited into the North Sea. So the areas just to the northeast just caught them winds that just came blasting down. And you can see some other exposed spots, 82 miles an hour at the top of the A939 over the left. And then Shetland again, 80. So you can see some quite interesting wind speeds. Altnahar in North Sutherland, 76. Inverbervie on the East Aberdeenshire coast near Stonehaven, 76. Some pretty impressive speeds. Strom Ferry there, Rogat in Sutherland, it's 72.5. That's an inland site on the eastern side of Sutherland, and that's interesting because we saw some very strong winds funnel down to the east of high ground this morning. Now that one in Rogat was in the middle of the night, but we also saw some very strong winds further east in the Channel Lake. That's just outside Braemar, 70 miles an hour. There was a lot of trees down in that part of the world. Again, it was these very gusty winds to the east of the high ground, which we saw this much damage occur as well to trees as well, and some power outages as well. So if we just look at what's happening just now, we've got a strong northwesterly wind. You can see the hook of cloud and the hook of rain associated with the Storm Pia as it sort of moves down into sort of Denmark area. It's currently sort of here circulating. It's going to drift eastwards down through Denmark into southern Sweden and bring some very strong winds, as I say, on its southern and western side. So it's into these kind of areas which are going to get a battering. But for us, we've just got a northwesterly flow, an increasingly cold northwesterly flow. We've seen the temperatures dropping. It's currently 2 degrees with me here in Carbridge in the Cairngorms. The showers have started turning a bit sleety. The snow falling over higher ground. There's been snow falling in Shetland as we see this colder air come southwards. You can see there's a lot of showers, and you can tell by the sort of lines of the showers. The showers are banding together due to this northwesterly flow. You can see everything is blowing basically in this direction. So the showers are piling in from the northwest. So you get these shower after shower after shower in some places. But you can see further towards the east, across the borders here, down towards Edinburgh, there's a few showers just now, but these showers are drifting slowly southeastwards and will continue to do so through the rest of today and for the first part of the night. So we show you the temperatures. This is the temperature observations at 1 p.m. You can see there's colder air coming south, 3-4 degrees over Shetland and coming down into Orkney. The colder air drifting down across the Highlands, but still quite mild, as you can see, down towards the central belt and the south, still 10 degrees there in Dumfries, along with southern coast, and across 11 degrees there, looking Islay, 10 in Mull. It's still quite mild across the south and west. But this colder air is moving southwards, but I don't think it really gets properly cold, and the really cold air doesn't really make it down towards the south and the southwest, because we've still got this milder Atlantic air just trying to edge in. I'll show you what's happening with the air mass charts. We've talked about these charts for the past few days now, because this is what's been creating such a forecasting headache as we head towards Christmas. Now, this was a situation at midnight last night. You can see we're all in this wedge of relatively mild air through yesterday and last night. But here was a storm which brought the strong winds just to the north of Shetland. You can see what happens as this moves south. Just watch this colder air to the north of it just drift south. Now, that was a situation at 9 o'clock. You can see the very tightly packed isobars there across Orkney and Shetland and the northeast. That's where we had the storm force winds and 95 miles an hour gusts. But just notice that colder air is edging south. That's the 3 o'clock projection for the air mass. You can see these blues starting to make their way south as this low pressure system drifts further and further east, dragging this colder air southwards. But if you just look to the west, as I mentioned earlier, we've got this big area of high pressure. It's pumping this mild air up from the middle part of the Atlantic, further north, and then sort of back into these western areas. So we've got this cold air trying to push south and this mild air trying to push back in again. And that's what's going to cause the problem with the forecasting over the next few days, because the two are going to be battling it out. So that's how things are going to be looking through Friday. But just notice as I run this sequence, just watch this green and these yellows across the west. Just watch how they sort of pushing back towards us and starting to push that blue cold air away. That's Saturday. And as you can see, as we go through the course of Saturday, the cold air is pushed away again. That's the situation Saturday evening. And by midnight, the early hours of Christmas Eve, the cold air is sat to the north and the east of us. We're back into the milder air again. It's going to be quite wet. It's going to be quite a wet situation, I think, developing through the course of Saturday and then early Sunday, really quite wet under this mild, very moist Atlantic system. As we see the colder air all sat to the north of us for Christmas Eve. And then as I run the sequence through Christmas Eve, you can see we start to see the colder air just starting to try and edge back down again through the early part of Christmas Day. That situation, 6 o'clock Christmas morning, the colder air edging back down into the Northern Isles, into the Highlands, but the air's not that cold. It's not as cold as the air that's coming down just now. So I think, if anything, any showers we do see, maybe wintry across Orkney and Shetland, but I think it's going to be higher ground further south into the Highlands, which may see a few wintry showers. And certainly further south, you go in towards the central belt and the south, and particularly over England and Wales, it's going to be quite mild with any showers going to be falling of rain. That's the situation, as I say, Christmas Day. And as you can see through the day on Christmas Day, really, we've got this boundary of the colder air to the north and the milder air to the south, just somewhere through the middle part of the country. And that continues pretty much really through Christmas Day, then into Boxing Day. The colder air does work its way south. It just increases the chance of maybe seeing a few wintry showers on Boxing Day. But the look of it from this kind of chart, it looks mainly fine and quite settled, I suspect, on Boxing Day. Quite crisp, some frost around at first. And some sunshine, so not a bad day on Boxing Day. But as things start to change after that, you can see as we go into the 27th, we see an area of low pressure developing to the south of us. That's going to try and bring some wet and settle weather back in again. So it's a real sort of unsettled picture, really, flopping between milder conditions and colder conditions as we go through the rest of the period. So that's the situation for tonight. You can see we've got these showers coming down from the northwest through the rest of today and into tonight. Still some wintry showers you can see. I think there'll be some snow across Shetland and Orkney, some snow to higher parts of the Highlands as well, but I'm not expecting much. There could be some accumulation across the Northern Isles. But I think higher ground across the Highlands and Aberdeenshire may see a little bit of snow, but not really that much. If you look to the west, draw your attention to this system here. This is where the mild air is. Remember, this is what's coming up from the south. That system just edges into the west overnight, look, and that brings some longer spells of rain. We could see some winteriness as this encounters a colder air as it moves further east, but mainly it's going to be of rain, certainly quite wet for many western areas. But notice across the Northern Isles, we keep these wintry showers going, some quite heavy snow showers for Shetland. Certainly, there's a chance of a couple of centimetres of snow so on the ground for tomorrow morning, and maybe even some hail and some thunder as well mixed in with these showers across Shetland. But for many other areas, it turns quite wet overnight, somewhat milder air, just trying to edge in from the west. So temperatures for most of us will be above freezing. There could be some icy patches, particularly across the east, but it stays cold over Shetland here. In that cold air, we could see some ice, and certainly, like I say, some line snow perhaps overnight and tomorrow morning. But for many other areas, it's cloudy. We've got these showery bursts of rain feeding in from the west through Friday. That's the situation by the afternoon. One area of showery rain moves through. We bring this slightly colder air back in again. But if you look to the west, there's another one coming in later on tomorrow, and this is bringing in the milder air with it. That's the picture for tomorrow afternoon. You can see we've still got these wintry showers and a strong cold northwesterly wind blowing across the Northern Isles. But elsewhere, we've got this rain coming in from the west through the middle part of the afternoon. And then into the evening, you can see it turns really quite wet for many places tomorrow evening and tomorrow night. But just notice as this rain moves further northeastwards, it encounters this colder air. So there's a chance we could well see some sleet and snow, particularly to higher ground across the Highlands, Moray, Aberdeenshire, inland areas. But I think mainly towards the west, areas to the south, certainly towards the central belt and the south, it's just going to be wet, it's going to be rain. Still these wintry showers and strong northwesterly winds going across Shetland. Then as we go into tomorrow night, you can see that band of rain with hills, sleet and snow just sits there. This again is a boundary. That's a line between very mild air to the south and much colder air to the north. And you can see on that boundary line, a lot of rain around, but some sleet and snow across higher ground. I think most of this will start turning back to rain away from the very high hills because this milder air will be pushing further and further in. So as we go through to Saturday morning, you can see we've still got this band of rain marking the divide between the mild air down to the south and the colder air to the north. Again, look, some sleet and snow in places, mainly on the higher ground, but we could see some to lower levels across the Highlands, the North Highlands, Moray and parts of Aberdeenshire for a time. But certainly as we go into Saturday, that milder air floods in and it turns anything wintry back to rain. It turns really quite wet. There's a lot of rain to come across the west, as you can see through Saturday. Maybe some sleet, wet snow perhaps for the Northern Isles up for a time. But generally speaking, it's turning milder. We're bringing milder air in from the Atlantic, as you can see by the air mass. That's Saturday, 6 p.m. Mild air across all of us. Still cold across Shetland, though. Look, still quite cold day to come on Saturday. Some wintry showers around. But for many of us, it's turning much milder through the course of Saturday. That's that wedge of mild air I showed you earlier, right across the country, apart from across Shetland. It's a milder picture through much of Christmas Eve. But on Christmas Eve itself, if we look at the detail, it's going to be quite a windy day. But I'll look at it on Christmas Eve. Westerly winds, showers, longer spells of rain in place. It's still a bit colder across Shetland, but we've lost the really cold air. So I think for all of us on Sunday, Christmas Eve, anything forward from the sky is probably going to be of rain, and mainly across the west. But further towards the east, like you can see, it's a bit drier, and we could see just something a bit colder, just nipping into Shetland later. It's a lot of uncertainty. It's so far out, but the general opinion is that certainly Christmas Eve, it's milder with some showers around. Christmas Day, it potentially turns a bit colder. We're starting to see these sort of colder air coming down from the north again, but it's a real problem. Is this the Christmas Day forecast? Because we've got this milder air down to the south, colder air coming down from the north, some showers around, maybe something a bit wintry on the hills. But at this stage, we're not looking like seeing a white Christmas unless you're on top of a mountain. It's looking generally fairly mild. Christmas Eve, a little bit colder Christmas Day, but as you can see, we've started to see the rain and the showers moving back in again on Christmas Day. Again, look, something a bit wintry, perhaps over the higher ground on Christmas Day afternoon and evening. But on the whole, it's going to be fairly mild, I suspect, with a green Christmas for most of us. Now, that's one computer model. That's ECMWF. If I just run the same sequence from the GFS model, Christmas Eve again, it's mild, it's windy, showers, some longer spells of rain. Into Christmas Day, again, very similar, really. Fairly cloudy, scattered showers around, Not really any mention of snow apart from on some really higher ground. And certainly as we go into Boxing Day, it's looking quite settled really. Ridge of high pressure, as you can see on Boxing Day, so probably quite a frosty start. But it's looking like a fairly bright day on Boxing Day. There might be a few wintry showers over Shetland, but generally speaking, it's a settled Boxing Day for many of us, quite dry and quite chilly. But then as we go into the 27th, we start to see the Atlantic lows come back in again. Bands of rain here hedging northwards. We could see a little bit of snow on the high ground ahead of it, but generally it says rain. It's looking quite an unsettled picture through the 27th into the 28th. Well, as you see here, look, there's just a mention here from the GFS. We could possibly see some heavy snowfall later on the 27th. It's all a very long way off. We're talking nearly a week away. All subject to change. All depends on the path of this low. If this low is further north, the milder air is further north. If the low is further south, the colder air stays in play. So it's one of them situations, really. It's just a case of watching the forecast. But on the whole, as I say, over the next few days, we're flip-flopping between colder conditions and milder conditions. But at this stage, it looks like Christmas is not going to be white. It's going to be green for many of us, with quite fresh to strong winds and some rain at times. Okay, well, thanks for watching the video. Enjoy the rest of your day and your Christmas shopping if you've not got it done. Thankfully, mine's all done, but I know some people it won't be done. Okay, bye for now.